Alright, here we go. Week 11 video for criminal profiling class. Serial killer part 2. Here we are again, broadcasting from a secret location somewhere in the Front Range of Colorado. And we are hearing a little bit of Breaking Benjamin, which is always good to listen to. Even though we can't get it to shut off now. There we go. Now we got it to close off. Okay, we're going to finish up today with the stuff about some of the profiles, the typologies of the serial killers. Understand that when we're looking at serial killers, one of the areas that gets confused a lot in America is the difference between a serial killer, a spree killer, and a mass murderer. Each one of those is specifically defined differently, and because of that there's different typologies, different reasons behind it, different ideas on why people do what they do. And therefore, when you're looking at it from a profiling standpoint, there's also going to be different evidence left at the scene that's going to identify why they do what they do. The biggest problem when you start dealing with any one of those three, mass murderers, spree killers, or serial killers, is we've got to make sure as professionals you stay away from the political and the easy media spin analysis. Everyone always loves to blame it on, somebody's parents, or blame it on an environmental thing, or blame it on bullying. That's a big buzz blame thing in society today. When you take a criminology class, which we're running in the fall, you'll know that there's rarely one reason that makes up a criminal. It's not usually one event. It's not usually one input. And so that's the same for these high-profile serial killers, spree killers, or mass murderers. So we have to stay away from that stuff. We have to stay away from reading one thing about it and go, oh well, there you go, there's the answer. It's never that simple. And that's why profiles are a little more in-depth and based on the evidence, so that it can help us achieve our main two goals, which is to lower the suspect pool and to identify new investigative leads. So always keep that in mind. When we left off, we were talking about Levin and Fox, and the three typologies they had come up with through research. Each one of the three had two subcategories, so essentially 6 different typologies. Well, Levin and Fox had always come through and done another research. This time they were looking mainly at typologies based on the motivation of the offender. And they came up with 5 typologies: power, revenge, loyalty, profit, and terror. Now you can go back and look at the 6 typologies they had done prior, and you can see some overlap. Their reason for doing this research was not only serial killers, but they also carried it over into mass murderers and spree killers. And they fashioned this research to identify what is motivating these offenders to do what they do. When they looked at a power-motivated typology, they were including in that sexual sadists, that even though a true sadist doesn't get sexual arousal until the torture comes in. They looked at that as a power motivation also. So they put them under there. Revenge is a big category when it comes to the mass murderers and the spree killers. Now we're going to do a whole chapter on mass murderers, so I don't want to get too deep into that. But understand that revenge is a powerful motivator when it comes to murder anywhere in the world. And we see it manifest itself in all of those three different things: serial, spree, and mass murder. When it comes to loyalty, this is going to be based more on doing it for family, doing it for crime organizations, doing it for a cause that you feel loyal to. And so that's where that one comes from. Profit, obviously, we've already talked about that. Some of the most prolific serial killers in modern times are both the angels of death and the for-profit killers, the contract killers. So they get a motivation typology under this research. And then the last is terror. We often find in society that we don't want to classify people that are doing their killing for a cause, whether it's religious, whether it's eco-terrorism, whether it's race-based terror, whatever. We like to separate that as something different. As a typology, that just is a different motivation. It's not necessarily a descriptor of the type of person that falls into doing those kind of crimes, but it definitely is a motivational typology, and that's what those five are. We get these motivational typologies, and then the other typologies that Levin and Fox had done, the typologies that Dietz had done, the typologies that Holmes had done. And we get those because originally the two different typologies that the FBI came up with were so broad, so basic, and so hard to work with as an investigator to further your investigation along, that researchers came forward and said, we've got to come up with stuff that can actually be useful in a criminal investigation, that can provide new leads, can lower that suspect pool. And as they started doing research, they found these typologies to be consistent and found them to be valuable. That's why we get these. I mean, I just mentioned 4 different studies that are all extremely useful in helping further your investigation along. One of the things that is not useful in furthering your investigation is falling prey to the myths that surround serial killers. Again, remember when the original profiling methodology came about? They interviewed a handful of killers, 36, I believe. And they developed their method for classifying serial killers based on that very small, very limited in scope sample. And what I mean by limited in scope is they didn't go out and talk to contract killers. They didn't go talk to the angels of death. They didn't go talk to terrorists. They mainly talked to sexual sadists. And then they came up with their methodology for doing, and then a typology, organized or disorganized, for serial killers. From that has always emerged a series of myths. And the myths really have to do with about 5 things. They have to do with the intelligence of the offender, the race of the offender, the age of the offender, the sex of the offender, and then the typology of the offender. And what we have found through those additional research studies is that, and through just doing investigations on killers, that those classifications, every serial killer is below average intelligence, that they're all wrong. Every time you make a statement like that, somebody can bring up a name of a serial killer that doesn't fit that myth. Every serial killer's white. Chester Campbell, the one I had to do last week's homework on, was not white. Okay? Every serial killer's a man. A lot of the angels of death are not men, they're women. Belle Gunness, a prolific serial killer from the turn of the century, was a woman. There's all kinds of stories of the Black Widow style serial killers. All women. Okay? One of them from, I don't even know when, I think maybe the 16 or 1700s, from Romania, probably tortured and killed over 600 people. A woman. Okay? So, every time you hear somebody say, well, serial killers are white men between the ages of 18 and 35, understand that none of those are, first of all, useful in an investigation, and none of those can be pointed to be true. They may be true in certain individual cases. They are not true in every case. They are not true in most cases. And the reason that they do such a disservice for your investigation is, now you get caught into that trap. If you start thinking that way, right away your profile is skewed, because you're going to start out by throwing out those myths as if they are based in some sort of fact, some sort of research, some sort of evidence-based practice, and you're going to give this information to an investigator who is now going to believe that that is legit, and that may get him going down the wrong track. That may get him to minus somebody off his list of potential suspects because they don't meet those myth criteria, and that does a huge disservice for everyone involved. That's about a wrap on this for this week. Fall semester is going to be done normally again back on campus. We are taking registration for that now. We're doing a criminology class. We're doing an intro to forensic science, a lot more hands-on investigative type things based on the forensic stuff. And we're doing a corrections class. So look at those. This week you'll also, at the end of the week, have another quiz. Look for it, and a discussion and assignment. See ya.